$1,300,000,000. It didn't burn. It didn't flood. It didn't crash in a market panic. It simply disappeared, routed through a chain of shell companies in Panama. And the man who knew exactly where it went was found hanging under a bridge in London with bricks in his pockets and $5,000 in cash still folded in his jacket. Roberto Calvi was born in Milan in 1920, the son of a bank clerk. He wasn't flashy. He wore suits that didn't fit well. He spoke carefully. He worked for Banco Ambrosiano for decades, rising quietly through the ranks until he ran it. By the late 1970s, Banco Ambrosiano was the largest private bank in Italy, a Catholic institution with a reputation for discretion and deep ties to the Vatican. Calvi was known, in some circles, as God's banker. That title would come to mean something very different before it was over. To understand what Calvi built, you have to understand how he built it, because the mechanism isn't complicated. It is, in fact, elegant in the way that simple frauds often are. Calvi created a network of shell companies, hollow legal entities in Panama that existed only on paper, and he had Banco Ambrosiano lend money to those companies. The companies used the loan to buy shares in Banco Ambrosiano itself. This kept the share price propped up and gave the appearance of outside investment in the bank. The loans, meanwhile, sat on the books as assets. The problem was that the companies had no real business, no income, and no ability to repay. They existed solely to hold debt and move numbers around a ledger. If you had deposited your savings into Banco Ambrosiano in 1980, you would have believed you were in one of the safest institutions in Italy. You would have been wrong. At the center of this arrangement was the Vatican Bank, formerly called the Istituto per l'Opera di Religione, or the IOR. The Vatican Bank held stakes in several of the Panamanian shell companies and allegedly provided letters of comfort, documents suggesting it stood behind the debts. Whether those letters constituted guarantees was disputed, but their existence would later cost the Vatican $244 million to make the question go away. Calvi's relationship with Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, the American-born head of the Vatican Bank, was close and, investigators would later argue, financially consequential. Marcinkus was never charged with any crime. He died in Arizona in 2006. Calvi was also deeply connected to a man named Licio Gelli, the grandmaster of a secret Masonic lodge called Propaganda Do, or P2. The lodge wasn't a fraternal dinner club. It was, according to Italian parliamentary investigators, a shadow network with members in the military, the intelligence services, the press, and the highest levels of Italian finance and government. When the list of P2 members was discovered in 1981, it triggered a constitutional crisis. Calvi's name was on the list. So were the names of nearly 1,000 other powerful Italians. P2 gave Calvi protection. It also gave him obligations, and those obligations allegedly involved moving money that neither he nor anyone else could ever quite account for. By 1981, the walls were beginning to close. Italian regulators had started asking questions about foreign currency violations. Calvi was prosecuted and received a suspended sentence of 4 years. He appealed and remained free, but the case made him radioactive. Banco Ambrosiano's share price started to fall. The Panamanian shells needed more money to sustain the fiction. The loans grew larger. The hole in the balance sheet grew wider. In the spring of 1982, the Bank of Italy sent an official letter to Banco Ambrosiano's board, demanding an explanation for $1.5 billion in loans to foreign subsidiaries with no apparent backing. The board passed the letter to Calvi. Calvi passed it back to the board. Nobody answered the Bank of Italy. That silence lasted approximately 2 months. On the night of June 11th, 1982, Roberto Calvi fled Italy on a false passport, traveling under the name Gian Roberto Calvini. He went first to Austria, then to London. He checked into a flat near Chelsea. His secretary, Graziella Caracciolo, jumped, or fell, from a window at Banco Ambrosiano's Milan headquarters the following morning. She left a note condemning Calvi for the disgrace he had brought on the bank. The bank's board voted to fire him that same day. On June 18, 1982, a postal worker walking across Blackfriars Bridge in London looked down and saw a body hanging from the scaffolding beneath the bridge. It was Roberto Calvi. He was wearing a dark suit. His pockets contained 12 pounds of bricks and stones. He had $5,000 in cash and 2 foreign currencies on his person. The official British inquest returned a verdict of suicide. A second inquest in 1983 returned an open verdict. Italian prosecutors opened a murder investigation. In 2007, a Rome court acquitted 5 defendants, including alleged members of the Sicilian mafia, of murdering Calvi. The death remains officially unsolved. The week after his body was found, Banco Ambrosiano collapsed. It was the largest bank failure in Italian history. Investigators attempting to reconstruct the accounts found that approximately $1.3 billion had vanished into the Panamanian shell network. Some of that money has been traced to political payments, some allegedly to the P2 Lodge, some reportedly to Polish Solidarity through Vatican channels during the Cold War, a theory that some journalists and investigators have advanced, but that has never been definitively proven. The full destination of the money has never been established in any court of law. Creditors sued the Vatican Bank. After years of negotiation, the IOR agreed in 1984 to pay $244 million, not as an admission of liability, but, in their exact words, in recognition of moral involvement. Read that phrase carefully. Moral involvement. The Vatican Bank wasn't saying it did anything wrong. It was saying it was present. And that being present, in this particular moral universe, carried a price. The lesson embedded in the Banco Ambrosiano collapse isn't primarily about greed. Though there was greed, it is about structure. The scheme worked for years because every layer of it, the shells, the letters, the connections, the lodge, was designed to absorb accountability without letting it land anywhere. When the money was gone, there was no single person holding it, no single document proving the whole chain, no verdict that could close the case completely. The architecture of the fraud was also the architecture of its impunity. The bricks in Roberto Calvi's pockets have never been explained to any court's satisfaction. The $1.3 billion has never fully been found. What you're left with, 40 years later, is a number, a bridge, and a phrase, moral involvement, that does more work than any conviction ever could.